Good afternoon and welcome back to my study. I've moved upstairs this week. I'm no longer in my dining room. Here we go. Whoops. We need to talk today about the American strategy for winning World War II against Japan. It's going to be a two-pronged drive that's going to converge and reclaim the Philippines and then plan for the invasion of the Japanese home islands. Oops, went too far back. Okay, so first of all, we've got to get the Philippines under control because that's territory we've been holding since the Spanish-American War. And once we get control of the Philippines again, then we move on island hopping across. Oh, sorry, went the wrong way again. There we go. Island hopping. Let's first talk about what that means. I'll talk about Guadalcanal in just a minute. Island hopping means we're going to bypass those heavily fortified islands and go on to the next one and then work our way backwards. So let's say that there's an island here in the middle that Japan has heavily fortified. They're guarding it very much. We have control of everything down here. We're going to bypass that island, go to the one above it, conquer it, and thereby cut off the supply for this island below us. And that will help us be able to eventually conquer it as well. It's just a step in that direction, kind of like, playing leapfrog. You bypass the worst parts and get to the parts that are easier first. Okay, Guadalcanal is an island. It's a jungle island in the Solomon Islands. It will be the first step of our island hopping journey across the Pacific back towards Japan. One of the questions I will be sure to ask you on your next quiz, if you are paying attention, is where are the Western Aleutians? This is one of the things that we definitely needed to get control of and get Japan out of. Japan had taken over some of the islands of the Western Aleutians, but where are these? These are in Alaska, in the modern state of Alaska. And I'm going to show you on the map on the next page. Hold on here. Let me go over there now. Okay. So if you look up right up here, this is Alaska. And then this chain of islands comes all the way out here. So Japan had actually occupied some of Alaska during World War II. It's something we don't often talk about or even mention, but they really did have control of these islands. Okay. Then the Marshall Islands were the next step for American soldiers after the Battle of Guadalcanal. By the way, I hope you are staying busy and getting your work done. I know I gave you an assignment to watch a World War II movie. You can watch a funny one. You can watch a serious one. You can, whatever you want. My family sat down this weekend and watched the new Midway movie. It was very good, and it made a lot of sense of putting things in order from Pearl Harbor forward. So I did like that aspect of it. I don't think, my husband said it wasn't as good as the original Midway movie, which was done probably in the 60s or 70s, so it's a lot older, but it was very good. The original Midway movie was. But this one makes a lot of sense if you'll watch it. And it actually goes back before Pearl Harbor and talks about some of the things that happened before the war even started for America. So it was really interesting. Okay, so the Marshall Islands, we got through that. All right, so here is the map that we're looking at. We're going to talk next about the Mariana Islands right in here. Notice where they are. And notice also the Philippines over here. Okay, these islands we need to make sure we have control of them as well. We cannot get directly from the Philippines to Japan at this point. Flight does not allow you to go that far. So we need to have control from somewhere in here so that we can plan trips into Japan if we're going to bomb. Now, one of the things they talk about on the movie that I watched, the Midway movie, were the Doolittle raids, and I believe we talked about them earlier in class as well. They were launched from an aircraft carrier far out in the Pacific, and that is why some of them did not make it back to that aircraft carrier, because they didn't have enough fuel. Okay, so let's talk about the Marianas. All right. By the time we get to the Marianas, this is the summer of 1944. This includes the islands of Saipan and Guam. Guam is still a U.S. territory today. This was a massive, massive air battle. But by this point, Japan is beginning to see that they're going to be desperate. And in the battle for the Marianas, the United States was able to pick off 346 Japanese warplanes from the sky. And that's why they called this the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. It was just a really incredible battle, a lot of air power and that kind of thing. Okay. The Battle of Leyte Gulf. Leyte Gulf is in the Philippines. This happened in the fall of 1944. It was the largest naval battle in history. And this is going to be a very critical battle to the Japanese. They're going to lose 3 battleships as a result of the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Before I need to go back. I forgot to tell you one thing. I think this is interesting, and you might find this interesting as well. During the battle for the Solomon Islands, a young man named Lieutenant John F. Kennedy, who will go on to become a president, fought in a torpedo boat, PT-109. He was in command of it, and around 2 a.m. on August 2nd, 1943, the boat was literally sliced in two by a Japanese destroyer. Although Kennedy was injured, he gathered his men and swam 3 miles to shore with them. They were in the water a total of about 30 hours. And for that event, for that battle, that moment of courage, Kennedy was actually received the Navy and Marine Corps Medal and the Purple Heart for his courage in that battle. Okay, so let's go back to the Battle of Leyte Gulf. It was a substantial American victory, and this is going to be the first time that we're going to see the Japanese use kamikazes. Now, I know we've talked about this some in class before we had to go home, but we all know that a kamikaze basically is a suicide mission. It is a Japanese soldier who volunteers to give up his life for the cause of the Japanese battle. The kamikazes of World War II were a widely varying group. There were generally 2 categories. The first was traditionally trained pilots who crashed their own aircraft. Usually these were fighter aircrafts, and they crashed into enemy vessels. But the second kind were specially trained pilots who operated Okas. And Okas were similar to the German V-1, or a rocket-propelled bomb, but it was manned. The Oka was dangerous even for the slow bomber that transported it, since the short range of that rocket-propelled bomb necessitated a release closer to the target. So they would fly in very, very close, drop the bomb, and leave. They caused a lot of damage, the kamikazes did, but they really did not deliver the serious, significant blow to the American carriers that they were hoping for. I want you to see the difference here between a kamikaze and your typical soldier who maybe falls on a bomb to save the life of his comrades or his associates, his fellow soldiers. You know, it's one thing to give your life in sacrifice for those around, those that you care about, but a kamikaze was giving his life in order to inflict loss on others, in order to cause pain to others, and that's a big difference. If we were in class, we'd have a nice long discussion about that, but we're not, so I'll move on. All right, let's talk about Iwo Jima. This is the costliest battle in Marine history. The statue, the World War II statue in, I believe it's in Washington, D.C., depicts the Battle of Iwo Jima. In it, the Japanese resistance was crushed. Japan will never recover from Iwo Jima. They will consistently be on the run after this. The toughest, costliest battle for the U.S. Marines ever. Okinawa. Okinawa was the bloodiest single campaign in the Pacific for both sides. We know that the war is in the final stages at this point. It's just a matter of time. 12,000 American soldiers were killed at Okinawa, and 50,000 were wounded. The Japanese casualty numbers are even higher. They estimated 110,000 men died at Okinawa, and another 7,000 or 8,000 were casualties. Okinawa lasted 2.5 months. There was a lot of suicidal Japanese resistance, meaning that these Japanese soldiers would resist until they could resist no more, and then they'd commit suicide because it was more honorable for them to die by suicide than to die by being taken captive. Than to live and be taken captive, I guess I should say there. They were committed to fighting to the death. It was at the Battle of Okinawa that we got the indication of the difficulty we were going to face with invading Japan. At this point, our leaders are having to make that difficult decision of, what are we going to do going forward? Are the Japanese going to surrender? Because clearly we've got them on the run. And it is here that we're realizing that that is not going to happen very easily. During the Okinawa invasion alone, the Japanese launched about 2,000 kamikazes against the U.S. fleet. In desperation, the Japanese even sent their huge battleship, the Yamato, on a one-way suicide mission. Their plan was to penetrate the naval defense perimeter to deliver huge firepower against the American amphibious forces. But it was detected early. The Yamato and her escort fleet were welcomed by 300 American fighters and torpedo planes. And in a 2-hour battle on April 7th of 1945, the Yamato, with over 3,000 crewmen on board, sank along with a cruiser and 4 destroyers in the escort fleet. The Japanese Navy, as an offensive force, was essentially finished at this point. And that is where we're going to stop for now. We will go on to planning for victory in our next video. I hope you guys are having a great day.